The Middle East is a powder keg of tension, and the Iran-Israel conflict has just taken a dramatic turn. For decades, these two nations have engaged in proxy wars, cyber attacks, and limited skirmishes. But March 2026 marked a new level of escalation. Israeli airstrikes hit multiple Iranian oil depots in Tehran and surrounding provinces, igniting massive fires and causing casualties. The attack was not random. It targeted key fuel storage and transfer centers, the lifeblood of both civilian and military operations. Thick smoke filled the sky, streets were covered in leaking oil, and the threat of environmental hazards loomed large over the capital. Hours later, Iran struck back, targeting Israeli oil infrastructure in a swift, retaliatory strike. This rapid response sent a clear message: energy systems are now part of the front line. Civilians, governments, and the global community watched as critical fuel depots became battlegrounds. This conflict isn't just about explosions or casualties. It's about disrupting energy supply, demonstrating power, and sending a warning to anyone considering interference. The world has never seen such direct strikes on oil infrastructure in this region, and the implications could ripple far beyond the Middle East. Energy is the backbone of modern civilization. When oil depots burn, transportation slows, electricity grids are strained, and military mobility is compromised. The strikes on Iran and Israel's oil facilities are not just local events. They impact global energy markets, shipping lanes, and international economies. Fuel prices are extremely sensitive to Middle Eastern supply, and disruptions can ripple across continents within hours. For countries dependent on oil imports, even a short-term strike can mean shortages, price spikes, and social unrest. Beyond economics, the stakes are human. Civilians rely on fuel for heating, cooking, transportation, and medical services. Disrupting fuel supply increases risks to hospitals, emergency services, and basic life support systems. Military operations are also affected, with fuel-dependent vehicles and aircraft losing operational efficiency. When Iran retaliates against Israel, the cycle threatens both nations' energy security and civilian stability. This is a global warning. The energy infrastructure of the Middle East is not isolated. It is deeply intertwined with worldwide economic stability and the daily lives of millions. The trigger moment occurred when Israeli fighter jets and missile systems targeted 4 major Iranian fuel facilities: the Agdasia warehouse in northeast Tehran, the Tehran refinery, the Shahran oil depot, and an oil depot in Karaj. Fires erupted immediately, black smoke covering the city, while oil spilled onto streets, forcing emergency services into action. The attack killed at least 4 tanker drivers, with dozens more injured or displaced. These depots were chosen carefully. They support both civilian distribution and military operations, making them a strategic target. In a rapid response, Iran retaliated within hours, targeting Israeli oil infrastructure. This swift action shows the mutual dependency on energy systems and how strikes on fuel depots have immediate strategic consequences. Iranian state media framed the retaliation as a defensive act against aggression from Israel and the U.S. The rapid escalation highlights that oil facilities are no longer neutral. They are key nodes in the military, political, and economic battle. What happened over these hours has shifted the conflict from proxy and limited strikes to full-scale energy warfare. At the heart of this crisis is the reliance on centralized fuel infrastructure. Both Israel and Iran store millions of barrels of oil in specific depots and refineries, making these points high-value targets. Destroying or disabling them slows down fuel distribution, affects transportation, and undermines military readiness. This is a calculated strategy. Strike the energy supply, and you weaken both civilian life and military capability simultaneously. The conflict exposes the vulnerability of centralized energy systems in a modern war scenario. The broader cause stems from decades of escalating tensions and mistrust. Israel views Iran's nuclear and military expansion as an existential threat, while Iran perceives Israeli strikes as direct attacks on sovereignty. Fuel depots are therefore not just economic assets, they are tactical leverage points. When one side attacks these facilities, the other retaliates to maintain deterrence. The energy infrastructure itself becomes a tool of warfare, demonstrating that in modern conflicts, control of fuel equals control of the battlefield. The human toll of these strikes is immediate and devastating. At least 4 tanker drivers in Tehran and Alborz have been killed, while fires and oil spills threaten nearby neighborhoods. Residents are exposed to toxic smoke and black rain, causing respiratory and environmental hazards. Hospitals are stretched thin, emergency services face logistical hurdles, and civilians are living under a constant threat of further attacks. The psychological impact of knowing critical infrastructure can be destroyed in hours cannot be underestimated. Businesses are also heavily affected. Transportation and logistics companies face halted operations due to damaged fuel depots and blocked roads. Refineries are offline, disrupting local and regional fuel supply chains. The risk to commercial operations, both local and international, is compounded by uncertainty. Investors and insurers are cautious, fearing that additional strikes could hit other critical nodes. The economic and human impacts intersect, creating a crisis that cannot be solved merely by extinguishing fires. The first compounding crisis comes from disrupted supply chains. With depots offline and roads blocked by fires and oil spills, fuel distribution is delayed or rerouted. Vehicles, ambulances, and military units dependent on fuel face operational limitations. This creates cascading problems: delays in transportation, shortages in essential goods, and difficulty in maintaining normal civilian life. The initial strike is therefore amplified by systemic dependencies on energy infrastructure. Additionally, global energy markets react almost immediately. Even a localized disruption in Iran's refineries or Israel's supply can affect international oil prices, insurance premiums, and shipping costs. Countries relying on imported fuel from the region face the threat of short-term scarcity and rising costs. This first compounding crisis shows that local attacks on infrastructure quickly become regional or global economic pressures, adding urgency to diplomatic efforts and highlighting the fragility of energy supply chains. The second compounding crisis is environmental. Fires at fuel depots release toxic gases and black smoke, contaminating air and water. Streets covered in spilled oil pose risks to pedestrians and vehicles, while firefighting efforts strain local resources. The environmental hazards are long-term: soil contamination, water pollution, and risks of fires spreading to adjacent facilities. This crisis is not just about immediate destruction, but also long-term recovery challenges. The compounded effect includes social instability. Civilians face health hazards, transportation becomes unreliable, and trust in government emergency response is tested. Businesses, especially logistics and shipping companies, face rising costs and operational uncertainties. Both environmental damage and social stress amplify the initial strike's impact, turning a tactical military attack into a multidimensional crisis affecting public safety, economy, and daily life. The national impact is profound. By targeting fuel infrastructure, Israel and Iran are striking at the lifeblood of their opponent's economy and military. Fuel shortages can cripple transportation, hospitals, and military units. They also disrupt industries dependent on energy, slowing production and exports. A single strike on critical depots can ripple through the economy, forcing governments to prioritize emergency measures and resource allocation. Politically, these attacks send a message to citizens and rivals alike. Both nations demonstrate the ability to strike energy nodes, showing that critical infrastructure is vulnerable. This affects public confidence, government legitimacy, and the perception of military readiness. When fuel systems are threatened, the crisis moves from isolated depots to national emergency, emphasizing that energy security is no longer just an economic concern, but a strategic priority for national survival. The final warning is clear. Energy infrastructure is now a front line. Any prolonged conflict risks creating widespread fuel shortages, social unrest, environmental hazards, and economic disruption. The attacks by Israel and Iran show that modern warfare targets not only armies, but the systems that keep societies running. Energy depots, refineries, and transport hubs are no longer neutral. They are strategic nodes in the conflict. This represents a structural shift in warfare. Countries must now defend infrastructure, not just from conventional attacks, but from strategic strikes aimed at crippling their energy supply. The Iran-Israel conflict demonstrates the high stakes of energy in modern geopolitical battles, and warns the world that critical infrastructure must be secured or risk cascading crises. For civilians, businesses, and governments, the lesson is clear. Energy security is national security.